Let's do it.
Awesome. A lot of students have different approaches to task A and B. Some people choose to take a rigid, I'm going to write an opinion piece for one and a more reflective piece for another. When you're approaching the GAMSAT and going in, what's your initial strategy? Or what do you recommend for students to have as their strategy?
For me, it's just having a really solid essay structure and then having a multitude of tools that'll help you break down any topic into contentions that'll fit within the essay structure. So as we'll work through one of these examples and then I can talk through the details of that.
Yes,
Yeah.
that sounds good.
Okay. All right. I'll go for it.
And also, if you talk us through like how you think,
Yeah.
essentially just work through it out loud.
Sure.
So
Got it. Okay. So the moment you sit down with a GAMSAT, you're faced with the 4 prompts. So my process is always to first break down the theme. So I would actually type in the box theme, and then for each line, I would take down 1 or 2 dot points as the key points. So the first one reads, it does not take much to reveal the primitive and animal side of human nature. Okay, so that speaks to me just about human nature. And the keywords I'm trying to get at is those that you see on phrases, quote generator, for example, and then they group it onto those. Second one is human nature is malleable, it can take all sorts of shapes. So once again, it's about human nature and maybe malleability. Third one, cooperation is the essential characteristic of human beings. Okay, so at this point, once I get 2 or more of the same keywords, I'm pretty sure it's my theme. So it's going to be a discussion about human nature for me. And the rest is just about collecting keywords for extra ideas that I can link them to. So we have cooperation and human nature. Next one, we cannot depend on the kindness and generosity of human beings. Okay, that speaks to me about a cynical take on human nature. So now we've captured our keyword, which is human nature being our key topic. Now I start thinking about my contention, and there's a few questions that I ask myself to arrive at a contention that I can work with. And each of those questions are very simple because that's what works under time pressure. So there are 2 components to a contention. Number 1, I need to identify my subject, and this is for a argumentative essay structure. So my subject is the common keyword in the theme, which is human nature. And the next thing that I'm looking for is an outcome. Okay, so what is human nature good or bad for? So to put it into one of those 2 bins and get the general vibe of my essay, I simply think about that and write, okay, is human nature good or bad? And in this case, I like to take a more interesting approach to an essay because I think about it like a math problem or rather like a video game where the harder difficulty you go for, often the higher the rewards are. And going for a very common sense approach can be easy in terms of producing an essay, but going with a topic that's more interesting will likely get you interesting results. I'm going to say overall bad. So what can we say about human nature that is bad? So at this point, I start thinking about really broad outcome keywords. Okay, what is it bad for? And I can go back to the quotes to give me some inspiration. The last quote says that we cannot depend on the kindness and generosity of human beings. So that speaks to me about volatility and this idea of cynicism. So maybe human nature is the basis of chaos. That could be my contention. And it's something that's really broad and invites the reader to ask further questions. Because what do you mean by it is the basis of chaos? So at this point, I basically have my contention. I like to keep things simple. And then I'll move on to my 2 arguments. So in my argument 1, I would think about breaking down the keyword of chaos, because that is my key outcome word. So what does chaos mean? And at this point, it's hard to just ask yourself that question and come up with ideas. So I like to use frameworks the same way we do in interview answers. We do it here. So there are 2 frameworks that are good to use. One is personal versus societal. And the second one is thinking about time. So time long-term versus short-term. And in the structure that I teach, there are 2 paragraphs. So each of these will map onto one of the paragraphs. And one more is intrinsic versus extrinsic. So using one of those, I can start thinking about, okay, what does chaos mean for individuals and what does it mean for society? So then we can brainstorm some key outcomes for that. So as an example, we can think, okay, chaos in my personal life means maybe it's the basis of anxiety, right? That can be an outcome that I can use. So then my argument becomes a transformation of the contention, which is human nature dooms, let's say, the individual experience to anxiety. Okay, and relating that to my own life, I can draw from my knowledge of evolutionary biology, understand that, okay, humans are designed by nature to be much more biased towards the negative. So then I might put in that idea, so negative bias, and that can be the basis of something I talk about. And similarly, I can plan out the other pair of the arguments, which is argument 2. And now I ask, okay, why is human nature bad for society? Or what does chaos mean for society? Mapping that outcome word with the framework. So now thinking about what societal chaos means, it can speak to the idea of imperfect cooperation or defecting, like in the prisoner's dilemma. And we can talk about how human nature creates that. So that becomes my topic sentence. Human nature creates barrier towards cooperation. So now we have our 2 arguments. That wraps up the first basic phase of planning my contention and the 2 paragraphs. And we can go into the counter arguments and defense, but that comes down to a very specific structure that I use. If we want, we can leave it there, or we can dive into that more.
Just over if you could explain to me what your structure is and what your 3, 4, 5-step approach to section 2.
Sure. Number 1, when you sit down, summarize the themes, 1 keyword for each quote. Number 2, contention. Ask yourself, is my subject good or bad? And then second step, why is it good or bad? Or what is it good or bad for? So then you have your subject and then specific outcome. And that outcome is a very broad keyword. Third step, you start coming up with your arguments, trying to define that keyword, such as chaos, into using a framework such as individual versus society. What does chaos mean for a person? Drawing on your own experience. What does chaos mean for society? And now you have from that 1 keyword into 2 separate, more specific keywords that you can use as topic sentences.
And section 2 is so versatile, so many different themes that can come up. So do you recommend students draw on their own experiences as soon as they see the prompt? If an idea comes up, you write about it, or should it be more of a structured, prepared approach where you want to try and get through as many themes in practice as possible so that you're not trying to come up with new stuff on test day?
So speaking to the preparation?
Yes. So how best to the structure that you use and the ideas that you put into that structure, say, what am I going to say about the individual part and the societal part? Is that something that happens sporadically, like your actual ideas that you're going to put in? Or is it also you want to have written about it in the past so that on exam day it's fluid?
Okay. So I think what you're asking is, during the preparation phase, do you want to have the topics prepared and hopefully that'll hit one of your topics on test day, or rather than spontaneously coming up with them?
Yeah.
So I think the chances of you preparing for an exact topic that comes up on GAMSAT day is not something that I would count on. So the preparation for me is more about building the skills and a pool of knowledge that you can utilize creatively and consistently to handle any topic that comes up. That is what I try to focus on in my preparation process. It's not so much, I'll give you a million different topics and you're going to write on all of them, so then you have a bank that you're going to memorize. It's more, let me give you the ways of thinking and a system, like basically a formula for solving a math equation that you can follow step by step that'll always produce a consistently good essay that draws on your existing knowledge.
Great. And do you have any tips or hacks around this system? Something that students can implement and get good outcomes and improvements in their essay writing in a relatively short amount of time?
I have a lot of tips. So number 1, I think the most important thing to preparation is thinking about your identity, actually. What is the type of person that can score 80 or 70 plus on a GAMSAT test in section 2? And thinking about how can I become that person? Okay, then we're thinking about qualities. And the qualities might be something like, okay, I have a genuine intellectual curiosity in the ideas about human nature, covering that section B, part B, and then a genuine interest in philosophical ideas or knowledge about society, and that covers part A. So if you don't have that interest, you can go and develop that, listening to podcasts, which basically carried my whole preparation process, or reading books, or even going on Substack and reading articles. So those are the top 3 things that I recommend doing. So then from this process, you take identity to the qualities and then now the actions and habits that you do daily. So working through that process is really helpful.
Yeah. Surprisingly, again, it might be a hot take, so I might not put this in the podcast, but we speak to students who only end up doing 1 practice essay a week or 2 practice essays a week. And then eventually they feel they complain about not achieving a great result. And that can be for various reasons. They might have work, they're working full time, and of course they're studying or whatever. What do you think about that?
GAMSAT is a zero-sum game. They don't take a score cutoff and say everyone who gets above this goes into medical school. They take a percentile, meaning you have to be better than 90% of the other kids or students who are sitting the GAMSAT in order to get a position that's competitive. So if your goal is to put yourself in that position, then you have to think about, how can I be that top 10%? And it comes down to talent and the amount of work you put in. If you're super talented, sure, write one essay a week and then see how that goes for you. If it works well, great. If you're not so talented, or even if you are talented, you still want to work hard, then you got to put in the amount of work that's proportional to the result that you want to get, which is the top 10 percentile result. So that is to say, a top 10 percentile result requires a top 10 percentile work ethic in my mind.
Perfect. Shall we move on to the part B?
Sure.
Great. Is your structure different for task A versus task B, Kenny?
No, it's the same structure, actually.
Oh, nice. Yeah. That's unique because a lot of students have a different approach to section A and B. Yeah.
Yeah, there's all sorts of approaches out there. Some people write personal reflections as the introduction. Everyone has a different style. This happened to work really well for me and the way I integrate my knowledge and the way I think, and it's the one that I teach. So there's many approaches out there, but for task A and B, it's the exact same approach. But for the sake of the demonstration, I'll move on to the second set of quotes and then we'll have a look. So let me just clear the box here. And first thing we do, once again, analyze the theme. So first quote reads, "We are what we repeatedly do." Habit. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit. Okay, so that's my keyword. Second one, it is not who we are underneath, but what we do that defines us. That speaks to me about identity. Next is act the way you like to be, and soon you'll be the way you act. Okay, so once again, habit and identity is the keyword that comes up. Fourth one, B, don't try to become. Okay, I think that's also along the lines of building a good habit. Once again, it speaks to identity and change. So at this point, I got my keyword once again, which is identity, and that becomes the subject of my contention. So my contention now asks, what is identity? Good or bad? Our first question, is it good or bad? So for me, automatically, it comes to mind as something that's good, something that's positive that I can write about. However, if I want to be really interesting, I can take the opposite route to be contrarian. So I'm actually going to go with bad and see where this goes. And the important thing I want to highlight is that oftentimes I don't know exactly where I'm going, and that's actually what produces an interesting essay. If you already can visualize in your mind, okay, here's my essay, so can the examiner when they're reading your contention, and it becomes a very boring essay. So, okay, contention, the identity is bad. Why is it? So I need a broad outcome word. And for me, there's almost like this bank of outcome words that I go for. So identity forms the basis of, and we can think about words like chaos, stagnation. So in this case, what speaks to me the most is probably, and I can go back when I'm stuck to look at the themes again and see what they're trying to get to, which is success. Okay. So speaking on that, we can say that identity is the enemy of success as my contention. Something very broad, and then now I can unpack into my arguments. So argument one, I would like to think about what does success mean intrinsically versus extrinsically. So that's the framework I'm going to use this time. So success for me intrinsically maybe means peace. Right? That's an important aspect. So then identity, hindrance, or is a hindrance towards inner peace. Okay, so that's my argument one. And then argument two, why is it bad extrinsically? So intrinsic are the things that are inside you, how you feel, the qualities that you have as a person, whereas extrinsic are the things that are materialistic or even relationships, which are outside yourself. So why is identity bad for success? Materialistically, we can say that identity creates an insurmountable barrier towards, and I can pick one domain or I can be a bit broad, but let's actually go with, let's say, career success as my argument. So now I have success defined intrinsically as inner peace and success defined extrinsically as career success. And now I can start unpacking these with different examples and arguments. So that's the beginning process of how I would plan the Section B essay.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Kenny. I'm sure your students have found it super helpful having a structured approach to Section 2. Can you tell me just what kind of feedback you've gotten from them, how their performance changed before and after?
In terms of how they feel before the test, a lot of them tell me that they go from feeling uncertain, not knowing what they're actually doing and just hoping for a topic that they know, to feeling quite prepared and confident because they have this system and they know exactly what steps come if they encounter a problem. And in terms of performance-wise, I don't think I've known a single student who has gone down in score since I've been working with them. So that's good to know, but also speaks to their work ethic that I try to help instill in their preparation as well.
I can personally vouch for Kenny. And through Day 1 Ed, we're trying to also make the feedback loop a bit easier and seamless for students, from writing an essay to getting feedback. And if you want an absolute legend to look at your essays and help you practice, Kenny's the man. And I'll leave some contact information down below. On finalizing remarks, before we got into this Section 2 specific stuff, you talked about how the GAMSAT is a zero-sum game. And a lot of people find that quite harsh to think about. And they're like, okay, I'm just going to try my best and we'll see how it goes. But that also means treating prep very loosely and not having discipline and facing the reality of what a competitive exam is. Talk to me a bit more about that.
I think competition is something that you can't run away from, unfortunately. And some people face it early in life. Some people face it later in life. When you face it early, you might look like someone who's gotten a really good score in high school and now you're getting to the course that you want. Someone who faces it late might be now you're stuck in a job and you're trying to climb a corporate ladder. There's competition everywhere. And if you want good things in life that other people want, you have to compete for it. That's just the reality. And I think for me, once again, it comes back to the idea, not believing in the talent myth and understanding that it's just about skills and knowledge. That's all the Section 2 stuff is, right? Do I have the skills to be able to practice that good essay structure? Do I have the knowledge behind me that I can write on any topic with? And that's really it. What else is there? There's no special source that I have that someone else doesn't that allows them to produce an essay in 30 minutes. It's a very specific task. It measures those skills and knowledge, but it's not a measure of yourself, right? So it's something that can be improved on.
I guess we can wrap up there. Thank you so much for coming on the pod. It really means a lot to us. And I'm sure every single person who ends up watching this can derive so much value from the insights you shared, the lessons, experiences you've had. And you're a wealth of knowledge. You're a gun.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Really enjoying the experience. Thank you guys for having me.
Thank you, Kenny.